Let's be honest, we've all dreamed of it, haven't we? That fantasy of digging through the attic, finding grandma's old vase or a dusty painting, and taking it down to the Antiques Roadshow. We wait in line, heart pounding, only to have an expert's eyes widen as they tell us we're secretly millionaires. It's the thrill of the show, that electric what if. But every so often a moment comes along that reminds us what the show is really about. It's not just about the dusty objects, it's about the human stories they carry. And sometimes, just sometimes, those stories are worth more than any price tag an expert can offer. This is one of those stories. It's a tale from a classic 2002 episode in Ramsgate, Kent, where the brilliant expert David Batty, a man who has seen everything, found himself in a gentle, heartfelt standoff with a guest who simply wouldn't be swayed by money. The curious case of the Dutch candle holders. The scene was set. A woman, whose name has been lost to time, but whose story hasn't, stepped up to David Batty's table. In her hands she held a pair of ornate, intricately decorated candle holders. They were beautiful, certainly, but were they valuable? When Batty, with his characteristic warmth, asked what she knew about them, her answer was perfectly, relatably honest. "I know very little about them," she confessed. This is the starting point for so many great roadshow discoveries. The items, she explained, were a legacy from her late brother. "All I do know," she continued, "is that he thought that they were from the Dutch East India Company. It was a good guess. The family had roots in South Africa, and her brother lived in Cape Town, a major historical hub for the Dutch East India Company. It made perfect sense. It was a solid family story." But as Batty examined the pieces, a different story began to emerge. He turned them over, his expert hands tracing the delicate patterns. "Right," he began, and you can just imagine the guest holding her breath. "They are Chinese. A story written in porcelain." This is where David Batty's expertise became pure magic. He didn't just identify them, he gave them their voice back. He explained that yes, they were Chinese and they were copies. But they were copying something very specific, English silver originals from around 1720. The twist? These date from about 1760, he said. Think about that. The Chinese craftsmen were creating these for a European market that was already 40 years out of date. It was the 18th century equivalent of manufacturing a brand new iPhone 8 today. It shows how tastes traveled and how exporters scrambled to cater to specific, sometimes dated, European demands. But then, Batty pointed out the real secret. It was a detail that would have made most people think the item was damaged. "Another interesting point about this," he said, zeroing in on one of the candle holders. He explained the complex process of creation. The first firing in the kiln just to harden the clay, the biscuit firing, followed by glazing and a second, high-temperature firing. "But this one has split," he said, pointing to a fine line. "A split. For most, that's the end. You toss it, but not this piece. Now normally you chuck it away," Batty explained, his excitement growing. "But this cost, in Chinese terms, quite a lot of money to make. It's a complicated object. Instead of discarding it, the 18th century craftsmen performed a minor miracle. They skillfully repaired the crack, masked it with glaze and fired it again. The fault line wasn't a flaw. It was a survival story. It was proof that even back in 1760, this object was considered too valuable, too complex, and too costly to just throw away. After their dramatic rescue, these pieces were sent to Guangzhou, then known as Canton, to be decorated by the finest artisans. They were painted with exquisite famille rose enamels, those delicate pinks and greens, specifically for the French market. Batty pointed out another unusual iron-red band of stiff leaves, calling it not common at all. He concluded his assessment beaming. "They are, apart from that firing crack which doesn't count, they're in perfect condition." He had just unveiled an incredible history of survival, rarity, and craftsmanship. He then turned to the guest, his eyes twinkling. "You like them, dear? The money or the memory?" The guest's reply was wonderfully, refreshingly blunt. "I'm not mad about them," she said. You can almost hear the record scratch. After that incredible story, she wasn't even a fan. But then she delivered the most important line of the entire segment. "But they've got sentimental value, so they are very special." They were special not because they were rare Chinese exports, but because they were the last link to her brother. Batty, ever the showman, saw his opening. He leaned in with a playful smile. Well, the thing about sentimental value is that you offer enough,